worked in every piece of the business, from reception and trash taking out to having nearly a $3 million revenue book to having an $11 million agency as a whole, to taking it into our platform agency and doing acquisitions and M&A.
If you look at ALKEME, 21 on Insurance Journal Top 100, over 1,500 employees, 90 plus different offices across 35 states, $2 billion in premiums written.
You've got to constantly be thinking about, how am I reinvesting into my people? How am I reinvesting into my customers? And how am I reinvesting into my systems? And if you're not thinking about that, you're going to get left in the dust.
You guys are arming your producers with a process and technology to essentially put that on steroids. What does that look like?
Pick a niche that you can be good at and then hyper niche. We took it a step further in my agency where we front branded. Every one of our producers had their own brand that they ran that was specifically geared towards the niche they were in. When you know your product and you know the industry that you're going after, it makes your sales process that much more streamlined.
So Curtis, when I was researching, you've got about 5 million different stories that we could jump into. But the thing that I'd love to start with is, just tell me about skiing. What is it? What role has that played in your life?
Yeah. The funny thing about, skiing is I grew up in Southern California. So I grew up by the beach, and my family, actually, my father, who was in insurance, which we'll get to later, but he actually loved to ski. So I spent a ton of time on the slopes, and I picked it up really good. It's one of those things that you just naturally good at. Some people are naturally good at other things. But it's an area, like, what I love about it is being outdoors, one, and the ability that I feel totally to a certain degree in control of where I'm at when I'm skiing. And I feel like I've got full command of what's going on. And there's a sense of security and freedom that comes with that. And I try to use that in business a lot of times from a metaphorical standpoint. And when I look at how I would command a slope is how I would command the business. I want to feel the same thing. And so I kind of transition the same thing, because in skiing, you're always dealing with terrain that's changing, right? And I think that correlates directly with where our business sits today. Not only our business, but everybody's business. And as we go through these sea changes in AI and some other things that are attacking our business, it's pretty interesting to take on that same tactical approach, is to be prepared for inconsistent conditions and being able to adapt to those quickly. And for me, I think that is why I like skiing, is because I can pick up and adapt very quickly to conditions changing fast on me, and it feels very controllable.
What's funny is I can empathize with that in a totally different world. So I do a good amount of improv, sketch, and stand-up comedy, right? And in improv specifically, what you just described is pretty much that to the T. Like you know the basics, and so as a result, you can get yourself out of anything, even though everything is being made up completely on the spot. Which is why a lot of times I recommend people take an improv class, probably because it's easier. Because if most people went out and just went and did skiing like you did, they'd break every bone in their body, myself included. But I think that's so interesting. Is that essentially, though, what you are saying? Like, that you're going to get yourself out of this no matter what, because you've flexed that muscle 5 million times.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. I mean, you got command over what to do, right? I mean, our business isn't complicated. No business is complicated at the end of the day. You know what roadblocks are ahead of you. It's just a challenge of, are you going to be able to accept the roadblocks as they hit you? And are you going to adapt to them? Are you going to be able to change your course of pattern? Are you going to change your direction? Are you going to blow through it? What are you going to do? How are you going to attack it? And I think that is something that you're either born with or you're not. And, being a leader is a tough position, because people look at you when there's any type of sea change and they go, why are we doing that? And so, I'm constantly navigating that, and I'm constantly attaching people to the power of why. Why are we doing what we're doing? And making sure that we're communicating that across our team, across the industry, as to every move that we make. Why are we making that change happen? And why is that change occurring? It's not because I just woke up in the morning and felt like doing it. It's muscle memory kicking in and knowing, I've been down this road before. And I know we've got to adjust our stance, and we've got to make sure that we're ready to take on, the bump that's in front of us, so that we don't blow our knees out. you know? And that's the best way to translate it back to skiing. So yeah, skiing's an interesting thing for me. I thought I was going to be an Olympic skier. I skied at the University of Colorado Boulder. We had 100 guys in the team, and I was probably 99th. And found out really quick that there's a lot of really good guys out there. And so,
Yeah.
I ended up transferring out of University of Colorado, ended up at University of Arizona. My dad thought that I needed to be away from the snow for a while, and that my GPA should pick up. And so, I mean, for every practical sense of the word, I had a pretty interesting college experience, and I sucked every piece of marrow out of that experience and enjoyed it. Let's just put it that way.
I love it.
That's all I like to say about that.
Yeah, it's a good mic drop moment, because here, look, the reality is the results have came through, right? If you look at ALKEME, 21 on Insurance Journal Top 100, over 1,500 employees, 90 plus different offices, 35 states, across 35 states. 2 billion in premiums written, and then probably the one that I'm most impressed with is over 122 million in EBITDA. So you guys have been very successful, but what I found to be super interesting, one, is how it started. Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, so you guys didn't have the traditional a very common thing is you've got an agency, you start buying a couple of other agencies, you grow to be pretty big, and then you take on, maybe a smaller private equity company, and then 5 years, you flip it to a bigger one, you just get bigger and bigger and bigger. But you guys formed pretty uniquely. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, my agency, my legacy agency, I like to call it, my core agency, we were all part of a cluster. And I had grown. My dad and I'd start that at zero. My dad sold his business when I was in college and basically got out of the business and retired. When I came out of college, I was set to be an attorney. Thank God I missed that one. My dad's like, "You don't read very well. Why do you even want to do that?" And I'm like, "I get you. I understand what you're saying." But I ended up in the insurance space. Worked with my dad for 15 years. We built a business. It was about $4.5 million in top line revenue. It was a nice business, very family driven business. We tried to make our stretches and hire producers and grow where we could. Limited resource. And I looked at my dad one day and I said, You're just traveling the world and you're having a great time with mom. And I totally love that for you. But I have to protect myself and I'm growing my own liability. And at some point, I need to make a move. And I said, you need to give me more equity or you need to sell me the business. He said, I'll sell it to you. And then I was able to kind of free up from the old traditional mindset that was in place at the organization, take the business in different directions. I added on a personal lines division, a benefits division, a financial services division, grew it to about 11 million in top line revenue. And then I just kind of woke up one day and said, like, man, I don't want to be 72 years old and sitting on top of an agency and having everything on my shoulders, where I have to, be the top sales guy. I have to be the HR. I have to be the IT. I have to be the accounting, the accounting person. I have to be the guy that takes the trash out, which I've done. I've done everything in insurance, literally, from take out the trash, sweep the floors to,
Well, let me pause right there because I want to ask a couple of things. So you're at 11 million. I'm going to play devil's advocate real quick.
Yeah.
Could you not have hired those different positions, still hit, let's just say 15, 20% EBITDA, and then done whatever you wanted?
Well, that's a lifestyle business, right? And at some point you got to challenge, like I'm a competitive guy and a lifestyle business wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to create generational wealth. And I wanted to do it for others. I wanted to do it for my people and I wanted to do it for others. And I wanted to pave a new way in insurance that I saw a real echo chamber in the insurance industry that everybody was doing it the same way. They were all switching and, people would leave Brown and Brown and they'd take the playbook and they'd start Brown and Brown number 2. And yeah, Brown and Brown's a great agency. There's nothing wrong with it. It's like everybody's doing everything the same way. The same playbooks being rewritten. And I just saw a real opportunity to say, you know what, let's buck the system. Let's take it in a different direction. Let's embrace technology. Let's put technology at the forefront of our decision making. Let's be a production-based organization that thinks about the customer first. And people lip service, customer journey, but then the gut resource that goes along with the customer service section, right? And then it's about how do we empower our people to be more proactive in their business and have more ownership in kind of their day-to-day structure, and how do we make their job fulfilled. And that leads to high retention, that leads to better results, and then obviously profitability will come behind that. A lot of people tend in our space to financially engineer the result, and so they start with the financial result they want and they back into how to get there. We talk about how do we get the customer journey to be the best, how do we keep retention high, and then how do we treat our people, which is a huge part of the picture. Is how are you making their jobs more fulfilling so that they have a better experience at work, so that they love giving better customer service and they feel more ownership over their work product. And when I started to look at 11 million, like you said, it was a great lifestyle business, and I didn't need to do a thing. I could have kept doing that forever, and I could have incrementally grown that to 20 million. But again, lifestyle business, a lot of people in that lifestyle zone, you've got to constantly be thinking about, how am I reinvesting into my people? How am I reinvesting into my customers? And how am I reinvesting into my systems? And if you're not thinking about that, you're going to get left in the dust. And I could see that early on. And I saw that the traditional way that insurance was done, I call it the mahogany wave or the silver tsunami, where it's like you got to have mahogany desks and you got to have green carpet and you got to hang a dead animal on the wall, And I was like, no, I don't want to run a business like that. I don't want to run that same playbook at it, right? Or I don't want to go hire a bunch of people that came out of ABC publicly traded company and put them in my organization and have them run their playbook with my people. I wanted to totally just blow that up and start fresh and start with a fresh look and take on how I thought the business could be built going forward.
Well, so okay, so you in ALKEME, that all makes sense, and that's definitely like you were driven by, like, you wanted to do something more. A lifestyle business was fine, but you wanted to build something that hadn't been built before, and you had that drive to do that. So so as I understand this, there were 6 insurance agencies and 1 wealth management firm, and you guys said, okay, why don't we just, instead of instead of your agency being acquired, why don't we just get it with the PE company, put all these together, and then go build our own? What did that process look like? How did you pull that off?
Well, we're all part of a cluster, all of us. And so there's actually 2 others. So it was actually 8 originally. And what we did is the cluster itself, they were going through some things and the ownership had changed. And the main owner had passed it to his son. His son was doing some things internally that we didn't like, that we didn't appreciate. And I kept saying, why are we paying all this money for this? We're not getting anything really out of it. So I went to the guys that I knew that were growers in the organization. I said, look, we all grow. We all run good businesses. Why don't we take that and start our own affiliate group, And that was ALKEME 1.0. We did that in 2018. But I said, here's the conditions. I said, we need to go on one system. We need to keep our data in one spot so that we can harness our data and we can creatively, consciously make decisions that are fact-based to grow our business the right way. And so we started with that in mind in 2018, which is, if you look at the way things have evolved, we were way ahead of the curve. Didn't know it at the time. We just thought it was natural for us. It was a natural mechanism for us to do it. So we did that. We moved 8 out. 2 of them, and as we got on that system, we realized really quickly that we had a platform. We had $25 million in top line revenue, and we're like, here, we got a platform right here. Like, it's sitting in front of us. How can we take that platform now? And as I'm having discussions with, like, insert any consolidator you want to insert in there, they were all calling me. They weren't showing me anything that was going to be transformational for my people or for me, except for a check. And I wasn't motivated just by a check. I was motivated by doing something transformational. And so I just went to them and said, guys, we got one problem in this organization. We all love each other. This is great, but you guys are all having conversations with people, and I know it. One, and if you start to leave, I got to start replacing you. And I said, so why don't we just merge together and then try to go get our own capital and sell off to private equity? And then we can run what we call an owner operators model, where we roll our sleeves up and we get dirty. And that's really kind of the foundation. And they all agreed. And since I had the largest agency in the bunch, I think they just saw that, hey, he's thought it through enough to lead. And so naturally, that's kind of how I became the CEO. the founder, got everyone to get into one room together and actually sell their businesses at the same time and merge. So we did a merger and an acquisition at the same time to start. Now the two that fell out for interesting reasons. And one of the people that fell out, his daughter actually came up with ALKEME and said, have you ever looked at ALKEME as a name? And that's how ALKEME really kind of originated from. We were supposed to be Unify, which was too close to our cluster's name. And I looked at the definition of ALKEME and I was like, it's like a seemingly magical transformation of combining multiple metals together to form a more formidable metal. It just made sense. But I didn't like the spelling. And so I just took the phonetic spelling and I was like, there we go, boom. And I didn't have to pay anybody for it. And there we go. We're off to the races. Quick URL search and domain search, and we were off to the races. But the idea was really with those guys was like, look, we've all got great lifestyle businesses, but that could be taken away from us. Like, let's create something that's systemically different and that can provide a future for our families, for future generations, that can result in generational wealth. And along the way, bring a lot of people with us, along that journey. And so when they fell out, I happened to have a group that I knew that I was working some wealth management stuff through. And I always loved financial services and wealth management and thought it really mirrors our business a lot for a number of different reasons. And so we convinced them to come in and kind of fill the void of those two leaving. And that's how we started. So we started with six PNC agencies in California and one wealth management shop right out of Scottsdale, Arizona.
Super interesting. Super interesting. So I guess my first question is, do you think, now I know the obvious answer is if they're really good and they've got a consortium of that, join ALKEME, get acquired by ALKEME. But let's say that there's a group out there that hears this and they're thinking, we could possibly do this. What are the roadblocks that they're going to run into? My first one, which I thought was interesting, was I was curious, like, what was the process? You already had mentioned it of like, who's going to lead this? And like, how do you have this many leaders and get anything done? That'd be my first couple things, but I'm curious, what do you see as those roadblocks?
And again, I had, 12 years of working with these people side by side, not living together in the same house, but partnering in some capacity. So I developed relationships that were beyond just a traditional business relationship. It was a friendship and a kinship for each other that was different. I think, the roadblocks that exist. I mean, look, first of all, today is like the absolute worst time to try to start something like this, just to let everyone know, with the publics under pressure the way they are and things happening, capital markets resettling, debt being high. I think what you don't know is kind of a superpower, right? Like, you think you have this idea and you just go for it. And you think it's going to be simple and it's not, but you know what? You have to have that ability to push that back and just be like, you know what? We can do this. And to have the belief in yourself that you can do it. It's not easy. And there's a lot of people that just aren't bankable. And what does that mean? That means that private equity looks at you and say, you're not bankable. I don't either trust your process. I don't trust you. I don't trust the way you put the business together. I don't like your mindset, whatever it is. It's very difficult. Raising capital in today's markets is a nightmare. And if you don't have scale right now, I would not want to be out there trying to raise capital on my own. I mean, candidly.
That makes total sense. And I can definitely see the reasons not to do it. And I can see the reasons to do it for sure. Well, let me ask you this. Could this not be done? Yes, it better if you got a capital partner because now you can go out and, well, you could free up liquidity. But could they not merge on their own?
They could, but that's you've got culture wars, you've got things that exist internally. And again, it goes back to what you said is like, who's going to lead? Who's going to fill what position? And can you get everyone to operate as a unit and a team? And I knew that the group that we had could operate that way. And we saw it early on because we were already operating that way. And so we were able to get like almost like a mirrored look into the business to say that, yeah, we can do this and we can do this effectively because we understand each other. I mean, you got to be careful. I mean, cultural issues are real and you've got to make sure that you're culturally aligned if you're going to try to merge some people together. Going out and taking traditional debt, bank style debt, lots of covenants, really hard. People don't look, insurance brokerages, including myself at the time, the sophistication level that comes along with attaching debt to your business can destroy your business if you're not careful. And so, there's this situational awareness that you kind of have to have as a leader to understand where your weaknesses are and then fill in with people that can actually support that weakness. And so when you look at debt and stacking debt up, like we run across a lot of deals where people went on a buying spree of smaller agencies and stacked debt up, and they actually got forced to sell their businesses. And those are guys that we don't target because they don't really want to sell their business. They just got stuck in a interest rate hike situation that put the debt so much, it was so hard on their business, they had to make a decision to sell the business. They had no other choice. They couldn't afford to continue to move on. And you saw that at the high levels too. You saw some of the bigger platforms hit the same kind of impact zone, right? So I think, my suggestion to people that want to grow their business and do it that way would be to do it slowly, to make sure that you lay down standard operating procedures. You get on one system, you put your data in one place, you make sure that everybody's operating in lockstep. I call it the Southwest model, Southwest Air. They ran the same plane, the same parts, the same mechanics could fix anything in a plane. That's how they kept their routes simple. That's how they grew their business. And I think that, you got to think about your business in the same fashion. And, I would never discourage anybody for being entrepreneurial and going out there and trying to attack and see what they can come up with. Just know that it's not as easy as it sounds and that you can do it. You just got to be prepared. And I think I heard Kirby Smart of Georgia say it, any type of success, you have to give and sacrifice certain things in your life for that success. And you got to be prepared for that. And I don't think most people in our space, in our business, are prepared for the sacrifices that you have to make in order to take a business to the level that we've grown our business to.
Well, and it's getting back to what you said earlier is once you get in the lifestyle, it's hard to get out of it. And for good reasons. Nothing against a lifestyle business whatsoever. But I hear you on what you're saying. I've been in a number of insurtechs where we've grown significantly, and it's different. It's definitely very different. So I want to talk a little bit. I want to switch gears here a little bit and talk about organic growth, niche markets. I've heard you talk a lot in previous interviews about, how you had grew your initial book to 2.5 million when you were first getting into this with security guards and a number of different niche markets. And I heard you talk about like how you guys are arming your producers with a process and technology to essentially, my words, not yours, put that on steroids. What does that look like?
When you're in sales, when you're starting off and you're starting at zero, it's a hard business to start. And that's why the dropout rate is so high, especially on the commercial side of the business, is because it's really challenging to get a book moving. And so I always tell people, if you're going to start the business, pick something, and maybe it's not a passionate thing, but pick a niche that you can be good at, and then hyper niche, which means drive deeper and niche within a niche.
Yep.
And that drives diversification. Well, what it does is it drives expertise, and then you be a thought leader. And so you put a lot of content out around that specific niche so that you're constantly in front of people, talking to them about problems that their business is facing. And we took it a step further in my agency where we front branded. Every one of our producers had their own brand that they ran that was specifically geared towards the niche they were in. And I'll use security guards as an example. At the time, we started buysecurityguard.com. Super simple. It was a direct hit. This shows you how long ago it was. But we were able to run that. The whole website was geared towards security guards only. So you're not searching through 100 different things to figure out who's the guy that handles security guards. You're front and center. It's all about you. It's all about your business. It's all information geared towards your business. It makes you an immediate expert. And so you become the expert in the industry. And then basically, as Google switched their calculations around on how they looked at direct hit URLs, we moved to Guard Pro Insurance, and still exists today as a sub brand. But the bottom line is to create the I don't want to say illusion, but create the illusion that that's all you do.
Yeah.
And it just makes life a lot simpler. And when you know your product and you know the industry that you're going after, it makes your sales process that much more streamlined because you know where their holes are, you know where their problems are, you know how to fix them quickly. When you're sporadically just writing anything, you can't be an expert of all things. a jack of all trades, master of none type scenario. It's like really know, and then you can start to predict and analyze like what are their issues, why are they having issues, where do you see it, and those discussions aren't then about a sale. It's an educational process that leads to a sale later, and that's the way we've always thought about it. So we really look at ALKEME when we look for bolt-on acquisitions. We really look for people that have a specialty. What is different about you as an agency owner and your agency in particular that's going to make me interested in it, right? And why do I think that that's going to be interesting for ALKEME as a whole and for all the shareholders I work for? And how do I create value through that? And so what we always look at is what industries do we like? What industries do we think we can mirror and counter and actually put into our puzzle and kind of bring across the rest of our network and create internal cross sell, which then pumps organic growth. And when you look at organic growth, and people don't really try to, I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand truly what organic growth means in a
How do you
business like
define
ours.
it? I'm very curious how you define it.
So organic growth is new, right? I mean, at the end of the day, when you look truly at organic growth, and when you get into a bigger business, they'll just go TTM over TTM and they'll take a calculation over the top, right? But really, to me, it's new. And that organic growth is new dollars. That's free money, right? That there's no debt associated with free money. That's just money coming in that you're creating. And that money creates $1 of organic growth, creates 7 in capacity to buy inorganic growth. And so when you really look at that, organic growth is the fuel that you put into the car that makes it go. And if you can't have organic growth in today's market, you're toast because you're just sliding backwards because the retention levels are falling off. We know that rates are softening. We know that. And when you look at it from a holistic view, you know, if you can't continue to have true organic growth firing in your system, at some point your system's going to slow and start to fall off. And buying tendencies, we're seeing buying patterns are switching. People are adopting more to new buying patterns than we saw when I was starting in the business. My dad was the kind of guy that had clients for 40 years.
Yeah. Yep.
That doesn't exist anymore. I mean, there's few and far between, and people will try to tell you they have clients for 40 years. But they may be attached to the agency, but the second the agency has a shift, that client usually moves out and they were attached to that person. And those are hard clients to find in today's market. Average life policy is probably 7 years at this point in commercial, and that's a long hold. So you've got to think about that, and you've got to kind of add that into your planning when you're looking at growing your business.
Here's a random question. On that 7-year number, is that also if you are the the specialist in that niche, or do you find that number's higher?
I think maybe a little higher, but again, a lot of those people are transactional buyers. So if they're looking, and if they want to buy an inferior product, which a lot are sold, you can't stop them from doing that, right? I mean, as much education that you can put forth on it, you can't stop them from buying an inferior product because they see a price point that they like. And I call that, your Nordstrom effect, right? You go to Nordstrom's and you buy something because you can return it, and that there's good customer service that's attached to it. And so, at the end of the day, I mean, it's not rocket science what we do, but it is, you do have to have a thought process that aligns with where the consumer's thinking and tracking with that. So, I mean, I think, what we're trying to do now is really, since we're a fully integrated migrated platform, which is kind of the front side of your question, we take everybody and move them onto our system, onto our name, and we get all our data in one spot. So we're able to take that data, harness it, and then we're able to cross sell out of that data. And then we're able to layer in our AI tools over the top of it. And those are on two sides. It's kind of a seesaw effect. So some of it goes towards operational leverage, which is making jobs easier. And we call it taking the sledge off of the account managers and AE's desk, CSR's desk, which is taking off the tasks they don't want to do, taking those off of their desks and getting them more involved in being proactive risk managers instead of just a reactive risk manager. And, what does that mean? I mean, there's a lot of stuff like certificates and things that you can run automated. Yes, certificates is a super important thing. I used to do a lot of contractors. I understand how important that is, but that's a reactive table stakes thing that you're supposed to do for your client. But I want my people, I want my account managers being mini salespeople, having a conversation. What's going on with your business? How's your life? How are things going? Is there anything we can help you with? Hey, I see we don't have your comp. Can I actually introduce you to Tom, who's a specialist in comp? I think he might be. A matter of fact, I looked up your experience mod. It looks like your EMR is high. You need some help. Can we give you some help? Can we have a conversation? Turning them into more salespeople that are engaged more in the front side of the process. And I think they get more value out of their job when they're doing that, as opposed to, and I'm going to say paper pushing, but we know it's just electronic paper pushing now.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, and I think that that's a big differentiator. And so, since we are fully migrated and integrated, we don't have to work like a lot of our competitors do, which is they're working on reintegrating the company back into one company, as opposed to a loose consolidation of a bunch of companies, right? And so we can focus on putting all of our money and all of our investment and all of our effort into AI. How do we drive AI differently into our business, not only from an analytical standpoint, from a sales process standpoint, from a service standpoint? And then can we do things like automate workflows right from the inbox? Yes, we can. We're doing it. We can take it from subject line and we can actually start to run a workflow in the middle of the night as an email comes in, and we can start to process that and do 75% of the load and then leave it for the account manager to finish off the last mile. And so those are things that can impact your business from an operational leverage standpoint, which creates what? Profitability and shareholder value. And so again, anchoring people to why we're doing what we're doing it to be more effective in how we run the business, how we drive business, and how we grow the business.
You know, you had touched on this. You touched on it there about this integration process, and then you mentioned earlier in the conversation about agencies that you'd stay away from. As I understand it, you guys have a pretty detailed scorecard that you use to evaluate new.
How do you know that? Just kidding.
This is all from pure research. I'm happy to sync after on where I found all this, but I hear that you have well, okay, one, is that true? And two, can you share some of the things? I'm sure you probably can't share the whole thing, but can you share some of the things that are on that
I mean, look,
scorecard?
it's not rocket science. I mean, people are doing it in their head anyways, but we physically came up with a scorecard. You're absolutely right. And we blind score. So the people that are on an M&A call are scoring certain things like, hey, what's the age of the owner? What's the geography of the owner? How much gas is left in the tank? What is their differentiator? What's their CAGR growth look like over a 3-year period? You know, who are their sales drivers? Who are their carrier drivers? You know, do we think we can move the business? What system are they on? How hard is it going to be to move them off their system? Tell me about your sales process. Can we move you into our sales process? What lines and specialties do you look at? Where's your concentration of your business? And that way we can steer around things like when we started in 2020, you know, personal lines was fine in the beginning and then just totally imploded in California, you know? And so we had to steer around personal lines for a while. And so we'd score it out and we'd look at it. And the cool part is we'd blind score and we'd have 3 people on the call. And at the end of the day, we'd look at each other's scores and it'd be interesting to see how we overlapped and when we came together. And there is a direct correlation between the ones where we came together and made a positive decision and the results of that agency post acquisition, as opposed to ones where we had differing opinions. So it's just another way for us to really validate not only what we're seeing in front of us, and then also to have a look back period to when we actually buy them. How do they perform according to the score that we gave it up front? Did they under or overperform? You know, and that's a key piece of this is self-evaluation, self-awareness. You know, and again, it comes to repetition. When you're starting out, you know, unfortunately, anybody that starts out is going to have to get some clay on the table, which means that you're going to have to do some deals that you aren't the best deals in the world.
Yep.
And you get the clay on the table and you start to form. And I was told this by a guy that who's been in the business for a long time. He's like, you get your clay on the table and then you mold your clay and then the business comes out of the clay. Right. And that's the way it works. And so that's kind of what we look at is like, yeah, in the beginning we did some deals that we needed to do to get off the block, but now we can be very tactical in our approach. And each deal we do, we get better at that approach. We know what the warning signs are. We can see it. Since I've been on both sides of the table, I can relate to them very quickly. And I've been in production and I can smell it. You know, I can smell the problems when I'm talking to them. And I can tell them what their problems are as I'm talking to them. I can literally dive in and be like, is this one of your problems? And they'd be like, yeah, absolutely. That's a huge problem of ours. And so that just comes through experience, repetition, and muscle memory.
Okay. I want to dive in on something that you said on that one specifically. You mentioned some of these things that make total sense. Essentially, these are highly operationalized but flexible, so they can flex into what you're doing. Their systems aren't so rigid that like they're impenetrable. Like they can't be molded into what you guys are doing. Am I right in saying that you're essentially looking for people that have built this? Well, okay, I'm hearing two things because I hear one, it sounds like you want some of these people to still be around when you acquire them, but at the same time, they've also built this business in a way that can run without them. Now, I know many times people look to acquire those agencies or brokers, and they prefer that the principal or owner or is not involved. Sounds like you guys want them involved, and but those are. Am I hearing that correctly, or am I misinterpreting something?
No, yeah, that we want alignment. So yeah, when we're looking at a potential partner, we don't do there's certain models out there that are actually really unique where they dislocate the owner from the book of business. The owner goes off and retires. They take that book and they take it and they give it to VAs and they have the VAs handle the book of business and they play with the commission in the middle, right? So they can churn off a lot of the business and still be profitable. Our theory is always like we want to be a growth engine. So we want people that are looking for how to grow their business to the next level, but can't get there themselves. They need the scale and they need the operational lift off of them. And so we have our shared services office, which we basically can pull off the IT, the HR, the payroll, the accounting, all the stuff, the banking, treasury, all the things that get in the way of you running a business and doing what your core mission was when you started. Because when you start a business with what? It's usually a strong producer that leaves an agency because something triggered him or her. And it could be a reduction in commission, it could be a purchase, it could be whatever. And they start a business in the beginning, it's all great. It's all production, it's all new. They're growing, they're growing, they're growing. Then all of a sudden, they run into a lawsuit. Now they got to get legal involved. They got HR they got to deal with. Now they got to stand up a system. They got to get an AMS system. They got to put processes and procedures down. They've got to think about now, can I hire producers and how do I get a producer to come to a smaller agency? That's a tricky thing. So skill will beat growth anytime. And as you, when I say growth, I mean growth in a smaller agency. People are like, well, I'm growing 15% a year. And I'm like, yeah, but your book's $2 million. Like you'll never catch scale like we have. You'll never be able to catch that scale and that growth that we can present because now all of our 83 acquisitions we've done are now selling on behalf of you too. And that's a big difference. That's a force multiplier. And then when you add AI to the top of it, AI becomes a force multiplier in your business, not only from an operational leverage perspective, but also from a growth perspective. And so I think you have two choices with AI. You either lean back and you get scared of it or you lean in. And we've completely leaned in on it and said, we're just going to absorb it and we're going to take it. And we're going to utilize the best we can in our business to help our business be better at what we do and to serve more people. And so I think, again, going back to it is just like, it all depends on what that individual that owns that agency is trying to accomplish. Most of the ones that we buy, they want to take a $2 million shop and make it a $5 million shop, but they can't get there on their own. They just can't. And so they come and they join in with us, and then they're able to take some chips down off the table, securitize their future, and then grow on the upside of creative value in the stock. And since we're the size company we are at 120 million in EBITDA, plus we're at a really good size. We're at a good size where you can still do triples on your business over a 2-year run, 3-year run. You get to 800, 900 million, $1 billion in revenue. Not so easy to triple that. And that's what I call the demarcation point of the industry. And that's where a lot of the early on startup roll-ups have gotten to, consolidation plays have gotten to, where they're now at a really tough decision. It's like, how do I take the next step forward? Because private equity can't get the return out of the business that they want, in that period of time.
No, I definitely think that's an interesting thing to consider once they start especially when you're looking at ones of that size. One of the things I'm curious about is, you took this from zero to where you're at today. As you And one of the things I found interesting in all of the research and in our conversation is you've got a pretty good feel all the way into the absolute weeds, into the complete details. What have you had to stop doing along this journey to scale with you personally, to scale with the size that the business has gotten?
You've got to mature as a leader, and maturity can come in a lot of levels. When you're running your own business and you're paying for it out of your own pocket and it's just you can lead with a lot more, I would say, undisciplined behavior, right? And when you're working on behalf of a bunch of shareholders and investors, you've got to lead with intelligence and you've got to lead with information and you've got to attack problems face on. You can't let them fester. Smaller businesses, you can tend to kind of weed them out over time or whatever and deal with them, and people do, but those businesses, again, like even my business was built to sustain a lifestyle, which means that I wanted people in place so that I could go have freedom to do other things, right? So I could go watch my son play water polo or watch my daughter play volleyball. And that's an important part that we still have in our business today. But you also want the infrastructure behind you in an organization like ours that when you come in, you still feel like you can grow your business forward with the tools that we provide, but you can still have some of that flexibility to have the lifestyle that you want. When you talk about me personally, I mean, I just love the game. I'm a student of the game. I didn't even have a business degree. I had a poli-sci degree. So when you look at it, I mean, I've been through like a master class MBA in the last 5 years from debt finance all the way through, how private equity thinks, looks, turns, modeling. How do you model for this? How do you design around that? And you've got to be, I mean, I tell people all the time, read books, listen to people, take in every conversation and really listen to what people are telling you and try to learn from it. Take something from everybody that you talk to and leave behind what you don't want. Those are huge lessons to learn in life. And I tell my kids that all the time. And then just come in every day prepared to do what you're supposed to do. Like it's consistency, and anybody that you've ever seen be super successful, it's all about consistency. It's all about coming to work or showing up to the baseball field or showing up to the soccer pitch and having the ability to show up prepared, listening to what your coach is telling you and being prepared to take action, and after a while, it just becomes muscle memory. But yeah, you're right. I understand every piece of the business because I've worked in every piece of the business, and I've worked literally from reception and trash taking out to having nearly a $3 million revenue book to have an $11 million agency as a whole, to taking it into our platform agency, to growing it at where it's at today and doing acquisitions and M&A. And, again, it's because I'm a student of the game. I'm constantly listening to books. I'm constantly trying to improve myself. I'm constantly talking to the other CEOs in our space. Where are your PB&Js, your processes, bureaucracies and jams? What is stopping your business from being successful? How can I take away some of the rub? Where did you run into a wall? Learning lessons from people that have made mistakes and then adopting away from that and taking the business away from that and taking it towards greener pastures. And it's never perfect. And it's really, you're buying imperfect businesses and you're trying to basically optimize them into your model. And notoriously, a lifestyle business by its very nature doesn't have a lot of reinvestment into systems, processes, procedures, accountability, sales culture, these types of things. And so it starts at the top. You got to get them to believe in you. You got to get them to believe in the message. You got to tell them to why you're doing what you're doing.
I'll double down on, you mentioned talked with everybody, read the books, do all those things, and I'll even add hire people, hire experts, hire people that have done that before, pay them to give you that advice. And it's just crazy how fast you can fast track whatever you're doing as a result of that.
I always say hire the people that want to take your job.
Yeah.
And I don't say that because you want someone to take your job, but you have two choices. You either hire down and that becomes anvil around your neck, or you hire up and you take the credit for the wind that comes under your wings. And so my theory has always been like hire up, get people that are around you and surround yourself with good people. And I tell my kids, like, look, I got a 19 and 21-year-old. I tell them since they were 13, you show me your 5 friends and I'll tell you who you are. You show me 5 of your business, your 5 of your people in your C-suite, and I'll tell you what type of business you run.
Yeah. No, 100%. Curtis, last question I have for you is, if we were to sit down and have an interview just like this in 10 years time and everything went to plan, where will you be? What will you be doing?
I say in 10 years time, I think we'd be a publicly traded company and I'd be the CEO of that company. I mean, that's really what we're building it to be. I mean, we're building it to be a forever company. We're not building it to sell off to, any of the publicly traded or strategic opportunities that are out there. We get those opportunities every day. They come in our way, just like I did when I was an independent agent. We want to do it differently. We want to remold the way that people think about insurance. And we're doing it. We're getting kids to come into the business. We're working in the schools, the business schools, and we're teaching people that there's so many different layers to insurance than just what they interpret insurance to be. And that usually is kind of like a used car salesman, right? They don't understand the art and the beauty of reoccurring revenue and zero capex and what that actually means to a business. Now, that model is shifting as AI comes into the business. Buying patterns will shift. And so I think you'll see agencies, and I think you'll see even our agency, where some of our, what we call the Hive, which is our business intelligence unit that actually services business and grows business, will be one of the top producers, if not the top producer in the entire agency. And it won't be people, to be a consortium of people over AI that drives it and drives growth. That's the reality of where we're at. I think in the middle, it's going to be sticky with people. So that's why I say, if you're going to want to climb to security, have a flight to quality, get up in the middle market sector and stick in there, because that's where the human connection is still going to lie. But anything that's, on the smaller side that I think you don't have a good handle on, and what I mean, don't have a good handle on, that you've got a service model where you're not touching that constantly because you start to lose money. You've got to figure that out. If you can figure that out, then you can run a business crazily. I think you'll see people that'll start businesses in a basement. And there's a guy that has already done it. We had $1 billion value company. He has 0 employees, and so I think that you're going to see some of that come out. I think you're going to see the MG units get spun up like that. I think those are the ones that are the most ripe for disruption right now. The traditional retail brokerage model, I think that you're going to see a seesaw effect with AI right now, where you're going to see some margin erosion, but you're also going to see operational leverage kick butt, and that's going to offset the margin erosion by a long shot in the near term. Where it goes, I mean, honestly, come on. None of us know where this is going with AI. Not even a shot in hell can I take a moonshot to tell you what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I've seen things developed where we've literally gone from saying, hey, I'll use Monday.com, like just a communication tool. And I've seen our team spin up our own communication tool in less than 2 hours. And that's how quickly things are moving. And if you're not a part of that, you're gonna get run over by people that are in charge of that. And that's where I see why we have an advantage over a lot of people. But that gap can narrow quickly if you don't stay on your game.
I tend to agree, and things are moving fast. There are about 5 million things that I want to dive into on what you just said. We'll have to leave that right? As a cliffhanger for the next episode.
I could go all day long, and I'd love to come back on and dive deeper into that. But I do think early on, InsurTech was going to be a disruptor, but it actually became an augmenter. I think you're going to see AI look like a disruptor, but then turn into more of an augmentation tool that gives you operational leverage. And that's really, kind of the way I see it.
I think it's going to be super interesting. Curtis, I could do this conversation. I could probably go for another couple of hours. I thank you for coming on today. It's been a ton of fun.
No, I appreciate it.
100%.